So this is just section 1 here. Now there will be a little bit of notes here, so you guys will want like some like loose leaf or something. These will be uploaded, or rather are uploaded onto the LMS as well, the full PowerPoints. But so what I've kind of done is I've gone through that section, and I try to condense the information as much as possible and give some context with it. So our big picture here is that all living things have certain characteristics of life. We went through some of them, right? It wants to reproduce. It has to interact with the world, right? So like, what are some examples of like just some alive creatures? Feel free to just like, with mouse. Feel free to just like shout some out or like type it out. But just list like, what are things that are alive? One would be like a lion, for example, right? Trees. You don't need to write this part down, by the way. So what are some of the things that are like alive? You don't need to write this one down.
Okay. Elephants.
Yeah, elephants. Like what if we could try and think outside the box, right? Like right now we're kind of like listing like
stuff already on. We don't better write this down.
This part, no.
My clock, it's moving, it's powered, it's alive.
Well, no, the clock itself, not quite so much, but again, we'll be looking at like, well, how come that is the case? But we have stuff like, insects. We go to categories, there's fish. Is there life that we can't see?
Tardigrades.
Which one?
Tardigrades.
Oh.
Those little insects, that are those little creatures they sent to space.
Oh yeah, but yeah, there's like germs and well, okay, that's not used. Bacteria, viruses, and so on and so forth. Right? There's lots. Like we could sit here for like the next 20 minutes and like list stuff off, but life is diverse. There's lots of it, right? There's even stuff like mosses. There's some life that sits at the bottom of the ocean and it sits by volcanic vents. Somehow it can survive that. I don't know how, but it does. So yeah, there's lots of different life out there. These are just some other examples as well. Again, like generally speaking, it's just a bunch of animals and stuff. I'm not even gonna describe. I'm just gonna do this. Yeah. Here we go.
Oh,
yeah. So like it's like a not a possum, but like something like that.
those little things that have those long fingers.
I don't fully know. I've seen them in I've seen them in like Netflix like documentaries and stuff. Yeah, so these are some examples. Here we go. Again, one thing I really like is, well, what about like, this is a coral reef, right? These are alive, technically. How is that like that alive? So that's where we're kind of going to. So we have 3 essential questions here today that we're going to go through. So we will answer these 3 here shortly. And just like before, we have all these vocabulary terms, so on and so forth. But so let's start diving into this. So what's biology? So there will be some stuff you'll have to write down here, not all of it, but so biology means studying life, right? So we look at the origins and history of life and once living things. And it looks at 3 primary components. The structures of them. So we're going to eventually end up looking at cells and what makes up cells. You look at humans, we look at the systems that make us up, our organs and stuff. So we're looking at, so the red stuff would be the stuff you'll want to kind of write down here. But so it looks at the origins and history of life. It looks at the structure of them. It looks at how those things interact with each other, right? Biodiversity and their interactions. And it looks at how these things function. So biology as a field is super broad, very, very broad. It's actually a lot of biology, actually, when you get to like the doctorate level, like doctors of biology, they spend a lot of time as computer scientists, actually. They're building models and stuff. Just the red stuff. There will be some notes, yeah. I'm gonna try and not have a lot. I make it as big as I can too. But if you can't read, let me know. I'll do my best to try and make it, but that's usually about as big as I can get it. Is everyone good?
Yep.
Okay, so makes sense. So this is what biology. What do biologists do? These are the things that they do. They study the diversity of life, they research diseases, they research diseases, they develop technologies, they improve agriculture, and they preserve the environment. Here in Saskatchewan, it's a really big like farming place. Pretty important. So you will want to have this written down. Same thing. I've seen these as questions done. This is really what biologists do. Okay, so this is what they do. And now my question for you is, how do you know something's alive? So we have 8 reasons. Just try and go off memory. Point of this is like, we try and go off memory here, you'll remember it better. I know you guys have it written down somewhere, but
What are the reasons?
yeah, just like what's some of the, like, what are some of the reasons?
Ability to reproduce.
You said, oops. So ability to reproduce. You don't have to write this down just yet. Just kind of brainstorming. This will help your brain remember it.
Organization.
Yeah, there's organization. Can anyone think of anything else?
What was the question again?
How do you know something's alive? Like, what are some of the characteristics of life?
Made of one or more cells.
Oops. Yeah, it needs to be made of 1 or more cells. That means it's organic.
Reproduce it.
Yeah, so ability to reproduce. And can anyone think of anything else just off memory?
Response and stimuli.
So it responds to stimuli.
Requires energy.
It requires energy.
Maintains homeostasis.
Stasis.
And develops adaptations over time.
So that's, I think, was that 7? So here's all 8. So yeah, good. So yeah, these are the 8 characteristics. And we're gonna quickly go through all of these. But so it's made up of 1 of ourselves. So you do want to write these down. These are the 8 different reasons. When you write it down though, leave some spaces in between. So leave like, I don't know, like 3 or so lines in between. That sounds right. You could do more if you want, but 3 or 4 lines in between each is what I'd recommend. So we call it an organism if it's had some of these characteristics. Sorry, if it's had all these characteristics. Yeah, these are our 8 different reasons here. So we're gonna kind of quickly go through all of these. Now, as we go through these, there might be some things you're like, well, that seems obvious. I don't need to write that down. That's fine. Okay, so the first one here is made up of one or more cells, right? You don't need to worry about this. We probably know what cells are, right? Hey, they're in living things. So this made up of one or more cells. The only thing you kind of need to know here is the difference between unicellular and multicellular. Now, some of you might just know like what uni and multi means, and you could differentiate from that. But you're welcome to write it down if you'd like. But it can either be single cell or multiple cell. All life started, and this is what we currently think is all life started as a single cell organism, and it slowly evolved into multiple cells. Just within your body, for example, you have brain cells, you have skin cells, you have blood cells, you have all different kinds of blood cells, right? And so many more. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of different types of cells in your body. So that's one of the characteristics. Now, one of the other ones is organization. Now, this is a little bit more complex. So they display organization, which means they're arranged in some way. And so this is where we get into those cells again, right? We have single cells. Those contain organized functional structures. We're going to explore a lot of single cells later. And then we have multicellular, right? And you don't need to write all of this down. You don't need to worry about this if you don't want. But single cells have just one job, right? If you have a skin cell, what's its job? To be skin. So there's some type of organization. Yeah, single cells and multiple cells, right? That's really what these first two kind of boil down to. But now we kind of look into, well, life changes. It changes, it grows, it develops. So most organizations begin as a single cell. When a human fetus is born, it's one cell. It's a sperm cell and it's an egg, and that's it. And then it eventually divides. We'll learn more about that later. I don't think you need to know what like this is. Yeah. You should have that from one of your definitions earlier, but again, it grows. We know what growing is, right? It gets bigger, it adds in new cells. But this process of growing, these natural changes over time are called development. And again, you might have these in your definition, which is totally fine. Just for the sake of time, I'm trying to kind of zip on through. Okay, so then of course it reproduces. Now the key thing here is, we know what reproducing is, but the key thing here is this middle part. So organisms that breed with one another and produce fertile offspring are known as a species. So has anyone ever heard of a liger before?
Pardon?
Has anyone ever heard of a liger before? Yeah. I forget what movie like popularized it, but they exist. Oh, not a tiger, a liger. The lion. Oh, sorry, say that again.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Napoleon Dynamite. Yes. Yes, that's where it was. So this is a lion. Now you can't really tell, but this thing's freaking gigantic. Like if you've ever seen a tiger or a lion in a zoo, this is bigger. Now this is liger, lion, tiger combined together. What do you get a liger? So you can actually breed a lion and a tiger, and this goes both ways. There's another one. There's a male liger and a female liger. Yeah. So they're a little bit different, if I recall correctly. Depends on if the tiger's a male or a female, if I recall. But either way, this exists, but it is infertile. It cannot produce an offspring.
It is.
Technically not a species. Yeah. Well, sorry. Technically, it's a living creature, but
Can't get anymore.
yeah, you can't breed two ligers together.
Lion and tigers are doing it.
Basically, yeah. You can do horses with donkeys as well. I think that I forget what those produce, but so we see instances of this. So they need to be able to produce fertile offspring is a really key one here. We're going to learn more about like how those things work later. This is not the only time we're going to see a lighter in this course. But so, we know what reproduction is, but why is it important? The big thing here is, what is the single goal of every living organism on Earth? To reproduce. That's driven in your DNA. So reproduction is not essential for the survival of an individual, but it's essential for the continuation of a species. Again, pretty straightforward. You don't really have to have that. Like, a species dies out if they stop having babies. But the key thing here is that fertile offspring. If it can breed with the same species and create a fertile offspring, it is a species. So one of the other things here is response to stimuli. So what is a stimuli? It is it's a reaction. Sorry, it's an input. Light, sound, sensation, temperature, feels vibrations. Those are all examples, right? So anything that is part of the internal or external environment and causes a reaction by the organism is called a stimulus. So something happens and there's a reaction. Pine cones, the ones that fall off trees, they sit there, they lie dormant until there's the proper conditions, till there's like enough moisture and stuff, right? It responds to something. So we have a stimulus and a response, right? Stimulus is the input, response is the output. Yeah, input and output. Again, if I'm going too fast, let me know. One of the other ones here is requires energy, right? It needs some form of energy. Most things get our energy from food, but not everything does, right? Plants use photosynthesis. So most plants and some unicellular, single-celled organisms use light from the sun. So organisms can either organisms can either make their own food. That's what plants do, right? They use the sun and they turn that into energy. We'll learn how that happens later. If you can't do that, you need to eat other organisms. So, lots of fish eat like plankton in the sea, or smaller fish, right? We've learned, the whole circle of life and food chain and yada yada. We've seen that in movies, but it requires some kind of energy. One key takeaway here, though, is you can either make your own or you have to eat it. We'll learn more about that later. So pretty straightforward. You need some type of energy, right? I think we got two left. Yes, two left. Homeostasis. This is an interesting one. So homeostasis is the regulation of an organism's internal conditions to maintain life. Sounds complicated. Let's kind of break it down. So does anyone here ever had their like hands in like a swimming pool too long or like wash dishes too long? What happens? You pull it out. It's all wrinkly, right? Wrinkly and stuff. You put your hand into an environment where it could not maintain homeostasis. So what happens there is it spits out some water from your cells to try and balance it out. It's like, oh, this water's really soapy and salty. Saltier than my hand. Let's balance it out a little bit. And that's what ends up, that's how it ends up shrinking a little bit and getting all wrinkly and stuff. So homeostasis is when it's trying to regulate its condition. So basically, if something happens that affects its normal state, it tries to restore that normal state.
I'm quite like word everything. You feel home again, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, homeo means same. Yeah, a lot of scientific terms are based in like Latin and stuff. So basically, you know, what happens when we're outside and it's 40 degrees out? We sweat, right? You sweating is trying to maintain that homeostasis. It's trying to balance out your temperature, get it to its preferred condition. Same thing when you're cold, your body's shivering, it's trying to warm itself up to get it to that proper temperature. So you can almost think of this as like that input and output, again, that stimulus and a response. And then finally, we have an adaptation over time. So an adaptation is any inherited characteristics that results from changes to a species over time. And we're talking a long time. The one exception there is usually viruses. Like, you know, we saw with COVID, like how many strains there were, right? You know, everyone gets the cold and flu every year or two, right? Because there's so many strains, it evolves. Dogs. Does anyone see like pictures of dogs 100 years ago, 200 years ago? Look totally different. Look, Google what a pug used to look like versus now. Totally different. So you can, most adaptations are very slow. Some are very, some can happen quick though. But basically, it changes over time. Adaptations enable species to survive and pass their genes on to the next generation. And adaptations are usually developed in response to environmental factor. That said, some things evolve really slowly. Alligators, crocodiles. I don't think they've changed much in like the last 300 or 400 years. Yeah, I think genetically they're almost identical. There have been some small changes, as far as I'm aware, but they're still changing. It just takes a very long time.
Isn't like sharks the same way?
I think so. I think sharks are pretty similar.
20 million years to change.
At least some species for sure. Yeah, that's what I've heard, anyways. So yeah, so they do evolve over time. Like those sharks came from something a billion years ago. I don't know. I'm pulling a random number out, but they are still adapted. And you know, if we were to fast forward 500 million years in the future, they would probably change a little bit. Maybe it's small. Maybe it's like they just have thicker eyelids or something. I don't know. Or they can withstand warmer and more acidic water. But yeah. But adaptation. So those are the 8 different requirements. And that's the really big takeaway is how do we know if something is alive? We're going to slowly look into some of these things over the course. Like this branches out. I like this as a first lesson because we're going to revisit a lot of this stuff over the next couple of weeks. Okay. So for the sake of time, is anyone still ready? Yeah. So we're almost done. I'm going to try and get you guys out of here by 3. Okay, so I had 3 big essential questions here, right? I'm gonna make this smaller. So these are our big 3 essential questions. So what is biology? So simply put, biology is, where's my computer? It's the study of life. It gets a lot more complicated than that, but at its core, biology is the study of life. So how can we do it? Biologists exist more than to be like, this is cool. There's a real tangible benefit to studying biology in today's world.
Where
Oh.
What do they call that? Well, not police officers, but they take your fingerprints, would that be like some sort of, study of biology? Because like.
It would
Humans have, like, each have different fingerprints, right?
it would kind of like be a derivative from it. Like we would have, like part of that is based in biological fact. Yeah, like that's an application of it.
To catch criminals and stuff.
Yeah, DNA sampling as well. That's the really big one for biology and crime. But so a bunch of things: research disease, develop technologies, fingerprints, DNA scanning. You can get your pet for like $100. You can look at their DNA. You can look at your DNA. Improve agriculture, farming, livestock, stuff like that. You look at a chicken 200 years ago, you look at a chicken now, they do not look anything alike. Okay, we will look at that. Preserving the environment, understanding what causes damage to the environment, stuff like that. Those are the big four. There's more, but there's a lot. And then finally, what are the characteristics of life? The 8 things mentioned before. I'm not gonna write them all down. I'm not gonna have you write them all down. But those 8 things that we've just kind of talked about. So what's going to happen here? So that's kind of the end of it. So we're usually done at about 3. We will keep on going with 1.2, maybe 1.3 tomorrow. Yeah. So in terms of those quick checks, you're welcome to submit those online now if you want, but I'm not going to officially take them in until all 3 are done. So there will be 2 more because it's a 3-section thing. So if you have it printed off, or if you have it in your notes somewhere, just make sure you put it somewhere you're going to remember it. Put a little star in something. You want to hand them all in at once, ideally. Yeah, but if no one has any questions, you are welcome to head out here.
Well, that's it for